This is the Dover Download Podcast. My name is Christopher Parker, and for the past 25 years, I've had the pleasure of working with, learning from, and talking to a variety of volunteer, staff, and community members. This podcast explores conversations, activities, and a variety of policies and programs which exist here in Dover to improve the community in one way or another. Recently, we had the pleasure of thanking Chief Bill Breaux for his time of service here with the city and to chat about his future. We are now going to have the pleasure of talking with his successor. With me today is Chief of Police Dave Terlemezian. Dave, welcome.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. We're going to start off with the easy question. What's the best way to pronounce your last name?
You pronounced it perfectly. It's phonetic, actually. It's spelled Terlemezian, and it's perfectly phonetic, Terlemezian.
And how often does that come up?
All the time since probably age 5. My old joke is that as soon as I could spell it, I was spelling it for other people.
Is that where you learned how to be such a patient person?
Yes, exactly.
A little self-reinforcement.
That's right. I think people see a Z in a name and that throws them way off. But if you actually take a look at it, it's pretty phonetic. It's easy to pronounce. It's just long and intimidating.
You know, not to totally sidebar this, but I think you're right. I think people do see Z or some other letters they're not expecting in a last name.
Right. And I think it's allowed me to have further patience, or I will try harder to try to pronounce other people's names because
you're more sensitive.
Being on the receiving end of, I'm more sensitive to maybe difficult to pronounce names, and I'll give it a shot more often than maybe other people will. I'm of Armenian descent, so that's an Armenian last name. My father's side, and my mother's name is Finnegan. So I think I probably look a little bit more Irish than Armenian with fair skin and blue eyes, but that's sort of the heritage breakdown here.
What's your background, not ethnically, but professionally or socially? Where are you from?
So I grew up in Massachusetts. I grew up in Framingham and came to UNH. And when I went to UNH, I initially started as an economics major. I was in the business school. I thought I wanted to go into international business. By about sophomore year, that dried up on me. That the 500 level classes in economics were not the same as the 400 level. It's still a very interesting topic to me, but the grades didn't reflect that. So I wanted to change majors, but also not extend my time at school. And I was going to minor in political science. So I made that my major, and then I got interested in criminal justice classes. So I do have some law enforcement in my family, but that wasn't a driver. It wasn't like one of those things where I grew up always wanting to be a police officer. It happened during college, and I ended up doing an internship in my senior year with the New Hampshire State Police, and that sort of sealed it, where I did enough ride-alongs and got interested in police work, and it's going to be something different every day aspect to this job. That was the hook. So I graduated college and began to take police-related tests, and the first job offer I got was from Dover, not knowing much about the police department, Dover Police Department, compared to other police departments in the area, and I'm really glad that I ended up landing this job. So that was in 1996. I've been with the department for 29 and a half years and risen through the ranks, beginning as a patrol officer, as we all do, spent some time as a detective, and promoted to sergeant, then lieutenant, and for the past 15 years, I've been a captain. And then just about 2 weeks ago, became police chief.
What do you think the average listener would think is the most unappreciated part of being a police officer?
It's really hard to tell. Probably the criticism that is linked to the national narrative and people's perception of police based on what they see either in TV shows, movies, the nightly news. They read about, they see on social media that police officers are doing something wrong or abusing their power or any combination of that we're all the same.
It's interesting to me how that narrative has shifted, but the goal of the narrative hasn't shifted. And what I mean by that is when you and I were growing up, the Rodney King scenario, or when you had the Floyd scenario a few years ago, you have this sort of, police, heavy-handed, defund the police, etc. But now more recently, you have the police aren't doing their job, so we're going to send in the National Guard to do their job. And so it's coming from the opposite side, but the goal is still the same, right? I mean, taking politics out of it, which we're not going to get into, but it's interesting to me, and I'm curious your thought on how you address the morale of your troops to say, look, that's a national conversation. Here's what we're doing locally. Is it as simple as that?
It's hopefully as simple as that. What I've told a lot of people is this is one of those professions, and it's not the only one. Let's be clear. Law enforcement is not the only profession where people criticize your actions, people Monday morning quarterback your actions. And I think the reason for that is that what we're doing is really important work, and we have an awful lot of authority. So I came into this business, and I'm sure generations before me came into law enforcement knowing that you were to be held to a higher standard. So that's not new. What I think has happened is the communication of and the spread of news with regard to misconduct goes like wildfire now more than probably it did 29 and a half years ago when I started. So the more people know, the more people comment, the more people maybe get fired up about one person doing something wrong or several people doing something wrong when a scandal hits. All that stuff was happening before. The vast majority of the police officers in this country are doing everything right. So the message we say locally is you have a tremendous amount of support here in Dover. Remember, the police department is nearly almost 100 employees, about 50-50 police officers to civilian staff. So we tell everybody, we as a police department have a tremendous amount of support here in this community. That's because we do things right, we're professional, we're well-trained, we hire well, and as a result, you're appreciated, you do a good job. The things that are taking place nationally or the opinions or some of the things that you'll see from critics is just that. It's opinions. It's often influenced by things that are taking place outside of this city and outside of your control. So we just try to remind them that, yes, we're held to a higher standard. That's something you knew coming into it. And the reason for that is you have a tremendous amount of authority and what we're doing is important work and therefore should be scrutinized. But for the most part, everybody's doing what's right. And when they're not, we correct and or train or sometimes discipline people for not.
When you look back on your career, do you see pivot points? Do you see a point where you thought, I'm going to be the chief of police?
It's something that I had thought of probably a long time ago. And I think when you're fortunate in your career to put in for specialized assignments and get them, and you feel like you're, in my case, I felt like I was doing a good job and being rewarded as you kind of track along from detective to sergeant and a quick promotion to lieutenant. That felt like an upward trajectory that was headed to this sort of capstone of my career. So yeah, I don't remember exactly when it was, but I always had a good feeling that it was at least a possibility.
Is there a point in your career where you think, if I'm going to go to the FBI or a larger agency, I either jump now or I settle in and I figure out a local path?
I think a lot of officers think about that around that 4 to 7 year mark. And that's probably when I thought of that as well. And some guys that I came up through the ranks with left around that period of time. So that's around the time when you have learned your initial role as police officer and are pretty proficient in that role. And then maybe are waiting for what's next and then naturally become perhaps a little bit impatient, or you just sort of start to think about what your worth is. And again, like you said, if I'm going to go somewhere and maybe go to a different agency that may involve uprooting and moving, should I do that now when either my family is very young or I don't have a family yet, and that becomes that time? And that just seems to kind of coincide with the period of time when officers feel like they have a good amount of marketable experience.
What's your first impressions? You said you've been 2 weeks. I got to think your stability with the department, and you're one of the most well-rounded officers and certainly one of the most, if not the most well-rounded candidate we had for the chief. So I got to think it's not an oh shoot moment when you move, one door down. But there's 2 weeks in, you've got to have some of those things where you're like, wow.
I will tell you that I definitely benefited from 15 years as a captain, which probably sounds to your listeners like a really long time. And sometimes it felt like a long time and other times it didn't. But I was able to watch 2 police chiefs handle the duties of police chief from the office right next door. I watched Chief Colarusso do it for a period of time and then watched Chief Bro do it for 7 years. And while you're not actually doing the work, you're picking up an awful lot of it just by being in proximity. And I definitely think I benefited from that. So what I would tell you is that week 1 was dramatically different from week 2. Week 1 was all of a sudden I'm attached to a whole bunch of different email distribution lists that I never knew even existed. And trying to sort through some of that stuff and determine whether or not this was just FYI, I need to take action, should I be responding to this, to also being inundated with, especially from you, meeting requests and or, just demands on my time. So none of it was overwhelming. It was just sort of that first week was sort of like, oh, this is actually a lot. Like there's a lot to sort through here. And week 2 has just been better. It's just been a little bit closer to getting a handle on things and just being able to sort of have some clear thinking and begin to do some planning. And one of the things that I've started is I'm having individual meetings with every single employee of the police department. And while I know everybody because I've been there for as long as I've been there, and a lot of the people that when they get hired, they pass through my office because as a captain, I was part of the hiring function fell in my division. It doesn't mean that I've been able to keep in touch with people and sort of see what they have going on in their lives. And that's the purpose of these meetings. So those are rolling, I think, starting next week. And they're just 15 to 30-minute check-in sessions, not about your job performance and not necessarily even related to the job, just almost conversations like this. How are things going and what's going on with you? And give them an opportunity to have direct access to me that, I think still is a difficult thing for some levels of employees to just walk up to the police chief and ask him a question. These meetings will give them that audience.
Police chiefs are people too.
And they'll learn that if they don't think that already.
So along that lines, that is definitely a change. What other sort of growth areas do you see, whether in the chief's role or in the department, are you looking to see over the next 3 to 5 years?
I think that there's nothing that jumps out. I've reflected on this question because I've been asked it a few times and I anticipated being asked it during the interview process. There's nothing that jumps out to me, and I think I could be a subject matter expert on this, having been there as long as I have been, that says, we better change this and we better change this right now. And that probably sounds like maybe a little bit of a cop-out, but the reality is that things for the most part are going really, really well. We're well-regarded, extremely professional. The big thing I think we need to start doing is shoring up some of the areas where officers could use just a little bit more training. There might be some gaps there are some gaps that we've identified that we need to fill in with a little bit more training. One of the things that your listeners may not know is in that period of time between 2020 and 2023, we hired 19 police officers that all still work here. So we've probably hired more than that either didn't work out or have gone on to other departments, but there are 19 officers that were hired in that period of time. And even though that's 5 years ago, 5 years of experience in the last 5 years is not the same as 5 years of experience in the 5 years before that. So especially when you're having that little bit of a whiplash where you're hiring a lot at the same time or nearly simultaneously. So I know that our supervisors have identified areas where we could use a little bit extra training, and that's one of the things that we're going to institute. Brief, 15 to 30 minute, I call them primer trainings, where they're just hitting on subjects that they may or may not run into all the time, but if they do, they should know how to do it and should get a refresher.
You touched on one thing that I was going to ask you about, which is sort of behind the scenes idea of a listener might not be aware, and I'm curious, I'm going to go with 100% of our listeners, unless you listen to this, have not gone through a process of being recruited and promoted through a police department. It's not the same as your general look at the want ads and apply for a job. What's it like and what's the stress like?
I'm glad you asked me. So you're talking about entry-level hire?
I'm thinking about both entry-level and your current role.
Okay.
Like entry-level, I'm glad you brought that up because
we're always recruiting. So.
Exactly. So the recruitment aspect of your position is very important because you need the entry level all the way through the captain level. Yeah. So I'm curious if you could walk a listener through it. If a listener is you 29 years ago and they're thinking, I think I'd like to be a police officer in Dover. What's that process? What's that like?
Yeah.
But then also from your standpoint, what was it like going through the process to become the chief?
We're always recruiting. And one of the things that I tell people is that we have really three different profiles of personnel there. So if there's somebody out there thinking, oh, I want to be a police officer, but I was never in the military, or I want to be a police officer and I haven't finished college yet, or I want to be a police officer, but I'm 7 years into my career in finance. Those are the three profiles of people that we hire. So anybody that's interested in being a police officer, certainly if they're specifically interested in Dover PD, we offer ride-alongs. And so the value of that is you're in a car, you're seeing how it's done, you're seeing at least a sample of what it's like to be a police officer, which again is the entry-level position that all police officers have. For a little while, we were battling that CSI effect where we would have inquiries where people said, yeah, I'm here to be a detective or I'm here to do crime scene unit stuff. And not everybody always realized that entry level is police officer. Entry level is the 16-week academy and then learning the job and going from there. So a ride-along is an option. There's a written test that, unless you're already certified, you have to take. And then there's an interview process. You go through a panel interview with 3 experienced officers that are going to ask you questions. And sadly, some of the questions are very basic, but candidates get them wrong. One of the questions is, what research have you done, or what can you tell us about the Dover Police Department? And with all of the voluminous research that they can be doing, or the voluminous information that's out there, some people don't know anything about the organization that they're in a job interview for. And that's what that is. That's a job interview. So that's that first entry-level meeting spot. And then the next level would be an interview with the division commander, with a captain. So if you do well on the order board, you meet the captain. And then if you end up continuing on in the process, we'll ask you to do a physical fitness test. And then if that goes well, then you're meeting with the police chief. And if that goes well, you get a conditional offer of employment. The conditions of which are a successful background investigation, medical exam, physical fitness test if you haven't already done it, and a polygraph. All that goes well, you're hired, you get a start date, and you begin training, which is a little bit of in-house training and familiarization with the organization, then off to the academy you go. And then you're in probation for a year after you graduate the academy. And the first part of your training after you graduate the academy is about 14 weeks of field training where you're partnered up with another officer and you work all different shifts and all different days off and learn the job from somebody else. It sounds like a lot because it is. Mm-hmm. And I said at the beginning of this conversation that it's important work that we do, and it's high liability. It's an awful lot of authority that police officers have by law. And it's important to be highly trained and highly proficient in how we do it, again, because what we do is important. That also, everything I talked to usually takes about a year. So between that first test that you take, and we either offer you the test at the police department, or you can take the Great Bay Community College Regional Police Testing, which they offer a few times a year, and lots of departments pull from those scores. But from that first written test through getting out on your own and finishing training is usually about a year. And as we've lamented before, it takes 2 weeks to leave this job. You give 2 weeks notice and you're gone, and it takes about a year to replace you. So that's the process for entry level. I would just tell people that if you're considering it, do the research, think long and hard about it, but also inquire with us about whether or not you can come in, get a tour of the building, do a ride along, and just really, really see what it's like. Once you're within the organization and you want to move around within the organization, we've been pretty good about trying to do our best to have as many specialized assignments as we can. This department is well known for being innovative. We see a problem, solve a problem if nobody else is doing it. And lots of times that results in a specialized position being created, whether it's by a grant or with our funds. And so for me, I think that's a good recruitment and retention tool. If you can change the job or change within the job and have several different positions, then it's like you have a bunch of mini careers. Because again, we've said 29 and a half years for me. It doesn't feel like I've been doing the same thing because I haven't been for 29 and a half years. It feels like it's been an incredibly rewarding career, but I've been able to do different things within the discipline and within the overall umbrella of being a police officer that to some extent it's flown by. As far as the selection process for police chief, that was lengthy, thorough, at times stressful, primarily because it was a position that I really wanted. And, it felt like the stakes were high. It felt like if I wasn't selected, that it was an awful lot of work to go through the process to not be selected and then kind of like where do you stand at this point in your career? Knowing that I had the experience that I had and the qualifications that I had, I felt like I was a worthy candidate, and that would have been a difficult position to be in if I hadn't been selected. So the stakes were high, and so it was a lengthy process and ultimately incredibly rewarding. I'm proud.
And you should be. And one of the things you should be proud, both on a personal level and a professional level. The personal level, you're a great guy. You're a great candidate. You've shown yourself, and you showed what the community and the department deserve as a leader. But the reason I think you should be proud professionally is you were the best candidate, but there were great candidates across the board. The department would not have lost regardless of the choice the manager made. The three candidates that came forward all brought perspective, they all brought professionalism, and they all brought a community care that I think we need to see across the board, across departments. But particularly, it was a badge of honor that all three of you were here for the community first, not for yourself first.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I felt like I was reaching for words as we were talking about, the process and it being difficult and, what it would be like if I wasn't chosen. But the reality is that, yes, in the job interviews and in selling myself, which is kind of an awkward thing to do. I'm glad that's sort of behind me. I don't really want to compare myself to the other candidates that much anymore, because you're right. Fantastic candidates and highly valuable members of the department that I'm going to rely on every single day.
You want to continue to nurture them to be part of the team.
And that's part of it too. Like if it was a difficult position for the manager to be in, or difficult decision, then that means that Chief Bro met his goal of having good succession planning and leaving the department in good hands. And that's a goal of mine, to make sure that to the extent that I can, everybody is well-rounded enough so that it wouldn't be a huge leap for them to take whatever the next step in their career is.
Yeah. As we wrap up, I'm curious about something you said at the beginning of the conversation, which is the perception of law enforcement and the impact of pop culture. And we see these TV shows, we see these, maybe not so much music, again, when you and I were growing up, rap had an impression of law enforcement in music. I think it's somewhat dissipated. It just could be that I don't listen to the popular tunes, as it were.
Yeah.
But I remember years ago, then Chief Plumber, now Chief Plumber, told me if I really wanted to see what it was like to be a firefighter, I should watch Rescue Me, which is a TV show that Dennis Leary did probably 25 years ago. Is there something that you would say a great way to get a sense for what it's like to be a police officer? It's not Mayberry RFD, I'm going to guess. And maybe these days it's not NYPD Blue, which for a long time was a standard bearer.
Boy, you're really dating her.
I know.
Dating yourself and ourselves. But again,
You're nodding.
You're right. I was going to say, you told me before we started recording that the demographic of your listeners at least part of them, might know what you're talking about when you say NYPD Blue.
My 27-year-old likes that show.
I would say this. I watch cop shows. I'm not one of those police officers that refuses to watch cop shows, but I do find myself frustrated a lot because of the lack of realism, and just knowing that in my mind, I guess, if you think about it, it's like, no, this is really entertainment. This is not meant to be a realistic documentary or a recruitment video or whatever. I would say, I can't think of right now, of course I'm on the spot, and maybe I'll think of it 5 minutes from now, of a TV show or whatever that is truly super realistic in all aspects, akin to what Chief Palmer was able to come up with for an answer there. I would say that the vast majority of it is sensationalized. It is not a boring job, but it can be a routine job. So as much as we say we're attracted to it because it's something different every day, it's something different, but along the same themes of public safety and really human service. Like, this job has become, if you're doing it right, about the people that you're serving. We're in the human service field. It's not just law enforcement. You're not spending your entire 10-hour shift enforcing the laws. That's the broader sort of context and why we're doing what we're doing and why we're called for help, oftentimes because there's some sort of law violation mixed in there, but the vast majority of what we're doing is helping people, and that's all people. And I've said before too, like, in a community like this is very different than federal or state law enforcement, where you may never see somebody that you interact with ever again. We're seeing the same people. It's a small city of nearly 34,000 or whatever the current count is, because there's only a small segment of that population that often has ever had a conversation with a Dover police officer. So what I say often is, today's victim is tomorrow's witness is the next day's defendant. So we have to make sure that we're treating everybody with dignity and respect because the role may change. So again, somebody that you've arrested today, 6 months from now, you want to make sure that that person feels comfortable calling to report a crime because we want to know when things are happening. If people aren't comfortable that they're going to be treated well by us, they won't call and we won't be able to do our jobs.
Well, I think you are a great leader of that mentality, and I look forward to working with you in the coming years and appreciate all you bring to the community here in Dover.
Thanks very much. I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk.
Dover has a wealth of history in its over 400 years of existence. Coming up, Mike Gillis is going to share some of that history with us.
This week, on October 7th, 1991, Dover launched a bold experiment in trash collection, the Bag and Tag program. The first day surprised everyone, not for chaos, but for how little trash there was. Collection trucks finished their rounds quickly, hauling away only about 6 tons of waste instead of the usual 13. Many residents had prepared by recycling more or holding back smaller bags until they had more to throw away. What could have been a bumpy debut instead showed early signs of success. The roots of Bag and Tag stretched back several years. By the late 1980s, Dover faced rising disposal costs after its landfill closed. The City Council created an ad hoc recycling committee in 1989, chaired by Councilor Gary Gilmore, to explore solutions. One of the citizens who stepped forward was local businessman Earl Goodwin, who became vice chair of what later became the Solid Waste Advisory Committee. Goodwin researched programs across the country and helped bring the pay-as-you-throw concept to Dover. His efforts were later recognized when he was named Dover's Citizen of the Year in 1996. The committee's persistence led to the opening of a volunteer-run recycling center in 1990, followed by curbside recycling in September 1991. Just a month later, Bag and Tag took effect, requiring residents to purchase official orange Dover trash bags and bulky item tags. The program was one of the first of its kind in New England and quickly became a model for other communities. Over the years, the impact was dramatic. Dover cut residential solid waste by more than half while pushing recycling rates above 50%. Costs, once spiraling upward, stabilized, and while bag prices rose steadily over the decades, the program kept waste management self-sustaining and fair. Now, after 36 years and a change in color from orange to green, Bag and Tag is nearing its final chapter. The City Council has approved a transition to automated toters beginning in 2027. Residents will receive 64-gallon containers for both trash and recycling, emptied by trucks with robotic arms. As Dover prepares for this change, Bag and Tag remains a proud example of local innovation, born from citizen leadership, careful planning, and the vision of people like Gary Gilmore and Earl Goodwin. It reshaped not just how Dover managed its waste, but how the community thought about responsibility and sustainability.
Thanks for listening to the Dover Download this week. If you like what you heard, subscribe through your favorite podcast aggregator. And if you have something you want to hear a topic on, let us know. Finally, this is just one of the many ways we share information about the city of Dover. You can subscribe to the Dover Downloads email newsletter every week or other newsletters that we have by going to the City of Dover homepage, www.dover.nh.gov. Have a great week.